Addressing diversity, equity, and inclusion is something that TMS is very conscious of and proactive about, trying to create a welcoming society. Another one of the tenets of our strategic plan, the TMS Aspires plan, is to be a highly inclusive and welcoming society.
Hey everyone, welcome to the It's a Material World podcast. I'm your host, Puneet. I have my co-host, David, alongside me. What's new in the MSE world at Georgia Tech since I've been gone?
Not much too cool, but we did just have our career fair this past week. So pretty hectic with everybody going to the career fair and going to school and lots of suits. But yeah, it was pretty cool. Our local materials advantage chapter helped our MSE school get a bunch of companies. And so we had like 15 companies when we used to have like 3 or something like that for our MSE specific one. So pretty cool to see the growth and materials advantage helping out.
Yeah, I'm just proud, since restarting the Material Advantage chapter a few years ago, to see the growth and to see Material Advantage working with the MSE department closely to host these types of events. So that's awesome to see. And that kind of translates to the topic of this episode, which is TMS and the benefits of joining when you're an MSE, no matter where you're at in your career, in undergrad, graduate student, academia, industry, experienced professional in the industry. So yeah, we talk about all things TMS. What was your favorite part?
Yeah, I think first off, TMS is a society that's also grouped in with Materials Advantage. And so It does have far-reaching effects that when I was a student, it was unclear about. So first we go over what is TMS, where does it cover, what does it do? And I think that that's just really important because it's really hard sometimes to know exactly where one society ends and the other one begins. And so it's very good to hear Brad talk about the society as he's the vice president and then will be the president. So really good to hear his take. And then just hearing about TMS is such a unique society. One of the real big benefits is that it's uniquely displaced, where it has like half of their people being theoretical and half the people being industrial, like in industry. And so you get a really nice mix, and then you have some academia and some government labs in there as well. And so you bring together such a unique group of people, and the like knowledge that they share and all these workshops that they do and he talks about are all just very fascinating to hear about and understanding like what TMS does for material science.
Yeah.
What was your favorite part?
Yeah, I just love that it's like a grassroots community. That's something that I feel like we're trying to build with It's a Material World as well. But they've really grown from the ground up, and they cover a wide variety of topics in the materials worlds and elsewhere. But then they also go super in depth too. So it's really cool to see that balance. And I think one thing that differentiates TMS is that they really cover this life cycle of materials. So they focus on going from extraction to the true research, all the way to the recycling of these materials. So it's just really cool. And you can see that from the events that they put on and each of the speakers that they invite to, not just their big events, but their small workshops as well. They really cover that entire life cycle of the process. But yeah, I guess another aspect that I really enjoyed from the episode itself is Brad's advice on storytelling in a highly technical presentation. So he was talking about how he, as a grad student, when he first presented his paper, it was nerve-wracking, right? And so he had a lot of advice for his former self in terms of how does he craft that impact-based story, even when you have a lot of results and a lot of technical information you want to share. How do you craft it in the right way and tell that effective story? So I think that's something that our listeners should super look forward to. What about you?
Yeah, I just heard about the benefits of professional society, and kind of makes me want to join one, especially because of the wide range. And so we talk about how professionals at all stages, and TMS specifically focuses on the life cycle of materials from extraction from the ground all the way to the end of life. And I think that would have been very beneficial for me as going into my roles I've seen multiple spots along the life cycle, and I've had to rely on just maybe unreliable Google searches or other friends who might know something, and just being able to tap into such a knowledgeable group at your fingertips with connections from networking and other ways that they translate information like journals and other articles, I think just would be super helpful. And so just it really does show the power that these societies can have on the impact and the progress of technology in our field.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a saying that you're a product of the 5 people you surround yourself with the most. And so I think that when you get involved in a community and a membership like this, then you really set yourself up for success, because MSE, it's relatively new, right? And so in certain roles, no matter the size of the company, it can sometimes be isolated, right? Where you're the materials SME. And so to be able to interact with a community of other material scientists, you can really grow and provide unique value to your organization, no matter which organization it is. So yeah, there's a lot of great tidbits to get from this episode. Brad was our first returning guest, and he was absolutely amazing. So yeah, I think you guys will really enjoy this episode. And right before we get into the conversation, I just want to mention that we have a Discord community, and that's really been popping off, and we've really loved seeing people ask questions, share resources. There's job postings in there. We also do industry chats as well. So we're really looking to build that up. So we would love for you all to join. There's a link in the show notes below. So without further ado, let's get into it.
All right. Hello, everyone. For today's episode, we are very excited to welcome back Dr. Brad Boyce. You might remember a few episodes back, in episode 76, Brad joined us to talk all about Sandia National Laboratories. Today, he's going to talk to us about TMS, which is the Minerals, Metals, and Materials Society. For the next 3 years, Brad will serve as the Vice President, President, and past President of the TMS. Glad to have you back, Brad.
Yeah, it's great to be back with you, David. Good to see you.
Yeah, I think this is the first time we have a returning guest. So this is an extra special episode. But yeah, like some of our listeners may not have heard of TMS before. So just to begin, can you give an overview of what TMS is all about, how many members it has, and the role it's played on the advancement of material science and engineering over its 150-year heritage?
Well, yeah, TMS, as you said, is the Minerals, Metals, and Materials Society. It's got a heritage that goes back 150 years to 1871, now 151 years ago. Back then in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, as I understand, 22 mining engineers got together and started talking about common problems they were facing in the mining industry. And from that formed AIME, which is the parent society for TMS. AIME is considered one of the original engineering founder societies. So it's one of the original professional societies across engineering. There were about 5 professional societies across engineering that formed in that time period. Well, AIME evolved over time, and in 1957, it itself became a meta society serving its own sub-societies, or one of which is TMS, the other two, AIST, and the Society of Petroleum Engineer, I should say the other 3, the Society of Mining, Metallurgy, and Exploration, SME. So those 3 other societies, along with TMS, make up the constituent societies of AIME to this day. So now, as far as TMS goes, TMS has about 11,000 members worldwide, and really, this is a professional society to provide the networking that connects minerals, metals, and materials scientists together across the world who work in industry, academic, and government lab occupations. So really, the contribution that TMS provides is really providing this foundational network for practitioners around the world in the materials domain, and helping enable them to share ideas and just like the original 22 did back in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, get together and think about how to collaborate and how to build better materials and so forth.
And so a common question that we hear is, when should you join societies such as TMS? And so you got involved when you were a grad student. Could you take us on that journey of why you decided to get involved and what that meant for you in terms of either professional development or what benefits that you were able to reap from that society?
Well, I think most people start to engage professional societies, or at least they get aware of them through student life, whether it's undergraduates or in some cases graduate students. Oftentimes, the first engagement a material science student will have is with the Materials Advantage chapter of their local university. And we are, TMS, along with 3 other societies, puts together that Materials Advantage. We collaborate so that you have exactly one society to go work with, which is the Materials Advantage chapter at a local university. Exactly. That's really a good way to start getting involved. From there, whether you write articles that you publish in some of the journals that we produce, or you participate in some of the meetings that we host, those are the common ways that people get involved next. Oftentimes, graduate students, for example, will begin presenting at TMS hosted or sponsored symposia.
And so this is a little unorthodox, but Puneeth actually refurbished our Material Advantage chapter. So Puneeth, I want to hear what Materials Advantage meant to you and why you decided to, basically the club was dead and he brought back the chapter at Georgia Tech.
Yeah, so I kind of noticed a lot of our peers, including myself, there were some challenges in terms of really like connecting to the industry. We had the mill, which David led. And so we had, the hands-on experience side, but I think I really wanted to see more of that professional development opportunities come to Georgia Tech, specifically material science and engineering students. And then I think, just due to lack of resources, it kind of died down in David and my freshman year. And so in my junior year, I decided I think it's worth, really bringing it back, really connecting to the industry. And I think my proudest achievement from that standpoint, not just from the personal development side of learning leadership skills, but we were able to help organize the first spring career fair in Georgia Tech's MSE department history. So that was a ton of fun. And I really love the connections we made with the professional societies like ASM and TMS.
Great. Awesome to hear that. Well done.
Thank you. But yeah, one of the popular events most commonly associated with TMS is your conference, right? And so I've just heard so many people say like great things about the TMS conference. It's always in a cool location too. But I just wanted to hear more about your experiences with those TMS conferences and why you think MSE students and industry professionals should attend that conference.
Right. So you're probably referring to the biggest conference we host every year, which is the TMS annual meeting, typically in February or March, sometime in the spring, usually in a pretty nice destination. Warm climate doesn't hurt. But before I get into that, because that is a really cool event to talk about, I do want to mention that we host roughly 9 or 10 other events every year as well. Our second biggest event is what we now call the fall meeting, which is held, October timeframe typically. And that's part of what's called MS&T, or Materials Science and Technology. That's hosted every year as well. They're both what I would call mega events. These are thousands and thousands of people. For example, at the annual meeting, we are, in some years we're approaching 5,000 participants. So it's just like a massive event. It can be overwhelming, but it's sort of like the Olympics of material science. It's just awesome to go to there. There's so much of vibrance there and excitement, so much going on, really way too much for any one person to absorb in a week. That's the challenge, is it can be overwhelming. You have to sort of pick your palette of opportunities through the week. But in addition to those mega conferences that we organize, we also have a lot of specialty workshops and smaller events. And that's where you can meet everybody and specialize in a very particular topic for a short, sometimes a shorter period of time as well.
That's awesome. So what is kind of like that primary benefit? I guess I know personally, like networking really just goes a long way. And that seems like a great place where you just gather thousands and thousands of material scientists, but also other specialties, right? And so what do you think comes from it the most of, the annual meeting or any of the other TMS events?
Well, Beyond the networking, what I really want to emphasize is how much you learn at these events. Like when you're working on something in your own institution, you can become insular. When you start to think you're doing the best that's ever, you don't realize how much other people are innovating in these areas or in related areas. You go to the meeting and you see all the other great work that's going on and you get inspired. You learn new things that you can take home and apply to your own work, but you also just sort of get inspired by the great work of other people, and you learn to elevate your own game through seeing how other people elevate their game. I would say, as a young investigator, when I first started attending these meetings, I actually found them a bit intimidating because it's so impressive. What our field is doing for society is just amazing. I mean, everything from environment, manufacturing, energy production, space exploration, healthcare. I mean, we're just so foundational to engineering, and you see it all going on simultaneously. It's a bit intimidating, but it's also just very exciting, invigorating.
I think that the biggest thing, just to add on to that, right, is that we've just continued to hear this advice that, material science is a very interdisciplinary field, and there's a lot of innovations that happen kind of at these boundaries of different disciplines, right? And so I feel like that's just yet another reason to kind of attend these events and get exposure to a lot of other disciplines, is because then you can see how other fundamental principles kind of can apply to your own work, and you can innovate at a more rapid pace, right?
That's right.
And recently we talked to another person, Babak, who talked about the globalization of science. And so I would love to hear from your point of view of hosting these workshops. How many people come from across the globe, and how do you think that bringing all these unique people allows for further communication once people leave?
First, shout out to Babak. That was good. A friend of mine, amazing researcher. I love how he does nano art as well. Great guy. So on to your question about the global aspect. And in fact, one of the focus, what we call the Aspires plan, the strategic plan for TMS, is to be the place where global materials practitioners can come together. And so of our membership, about 57-60% are US citizens, and the rest come from across the globe. So while we are based in the US, and so we're dominated a bit by the American participants, we try to be as global as we can. And I think, COVID has brought us some new challenges in terms of bringing people together in person, but it's brought us new opportunities as far as hosting virtual workshops and small events.
Now that I guess we're kind of on maybe the other end, hopefully, of COVID, right? And we're attending in-person events. Have you been able to incorporate that virtual aspect to maybe the people who can't attend those events in person? I'm just wondering what that looks like now.
Yeah, it's complicated, and there's not a simple answer there. We did, of course, during COVID, we used a lot of virtual events. We have piloted some hybrid events where some people would record their presentations and other people would present live. We found that in the large settings, that doesn't typically work so well. It's just, there's a lot going on. When you're running 90 parallel sessions, it's hard to even just ensure things like internet connectivity for all 90 sessions simultaneously. So it gets sort of unwieldy in very large settings. So for our large conferences, we're trying to still bring everybody back in person wherever possible and focus on the in-person event. For some of the smaller events and some of our committee meetings, for example, this is where hybrid and virtual make a lot more sense. They work easier. It's not as unwieldy. And that's where TMS continues to try to find new ways to engage people.
And so taking a step back, you're talking about these committee meetings. Could you explain the breadth of what TMS does? Because it sounds like you do all these great things, and I'm not quite sure that I or the listener knows exactly the full extent of what TMS does.
Yeah. So TMS is really volunteer driven and what we call grassroots. So it's material scientists making the society. Now there's a great staff working behind the scenes to make it all come together professionally. There's about 40 professional staff members who work for TMS. But what they're really doing is working for the volunteers who are members. And, I think the last number I saw was on the order of 1,000 of our members volunteer for the society in some way. And that could be organizing a symposium at one of our annual meetings. That could be editing for one of our technical journals. That could be organizing your own side workshop with TMS. So there's a lot of different ways to engage as a volunteer. And that really, it provides a nice pathway to get involved and to be involved in the society, not just in your own institution's work.
And so when you talk about all these volunteers, I think one thing that I like to equate it to is that in all these other disciplines, it's information is very accessible. And what I mean by that is like for any math homework, for any stats homework, there's like, you can just Google the problem, somebody's done it before. But for material science, and a lot of the problems we face are very unique, but we can leverage past information. The tricky part is knowing what it is. And so I think one of the great things about TMS is being able to have the experts come together in a community. And so as president, how is TMS trying to leverage the information and globalize it in a way that makes it more accessible, which I kind of think is the core thesis of what you try to do to educate and empower other material scientists?
Right. Well, I think what you guys are doing is already admirable, by the way. I think you guys are packaging information in ways that professional societies haven't yet tapped into entirely. Mm-hmm. And I hope to see TMS and other professional societies continue to evolve the way that they bring information. But if you look at TMS, the traditional way that we deliver deep technical information is through not only through the events that we've already talked about, but through our publications. So we are responsible for 4 technical journals. And in addition, we also put out study reports. So these are, and this is a growing emphasis for TMS. These are technical reports really looking at the future of technology in the materials domain. And it's an assembly of experts that come together and sit together and draft these reports. But when it comes to deep technical interactions, there's nothing better than these journals that we put out for learning what the state of the art is.
That's fascinating. I was just wondering, what is like that core difference between a study report and these technical journals? I mean, I feel like both, right, especially in the realm of material science, are really geared towards the future, right? So I'm just wondering, what is that focus with the study reports?
Well, the technical journals are really more a recapitulation of something that has already happened. It's the result of your research. Your research is now done, and you're going to put a bow on it and document in immense detail what you exactly did and what you found, and in fact, what was surprising. But the study reports are more about what do we think the future holds? Where do we think we should invest in the future? What will be different in a future journal article that isn't in today's journal articles? Or in future patents in material science? Where do we think the future patents might land? And so it's a little bit more of a crystal ball experience with the study or one of these reports that we produce. A little bit more anticipating the future rather than reflecting on what we've recently done.
And who writes those study reports? Since it seems like, with this crystal ball prediction, right? Hopefully there's some subject matter experts. And is it geared like specifically from industry to industry or like technology to technology as well?
Well, absolutely. Each report has its own tailored board of editors and contributors. There is a TMS staff member who helps orchestrate all this, but the TMS staff member is not trying to create an outcome. The TMS staff member is trying to facilitate assembling, as you said, the experts from our ranks who are willing to volunteer their time and energy to put together the content that makes these reports.
Yeah, I think that is a very great model of building upon your members, because I think that just fosters collaboration and just participation. And with 11,000 members, I'm sure it's very hard to get everybody to participate. But getting to that end point where people are participating, people are consuming, I think are all very important goals for any society to function, really. And when we look for the future, and you're talking about these reports and these technical reports, and now with the US releasing new documentation about you have to release all the data, it just kind of seems like your idea of collaboration, having the experts be able to interpret this data, is getting to be even more precise, as now all the information should be known. And so from your point of view, how do you think this research and the collaboration between researchers are going to evolve, especially with all these new regulations about you have to share data if you get this US grant?
That's an interesting question. I think that the sharing of data and information is evolving, as we watch it right now. But really, there are new platforms emerging like the Materials Data Facility, MDF. This is a facility that is a platform for sharing materials data. And there's also other facilities as well. I don't want to just plug that one. I want to acknowledge that there are others as well, but that's the one that comes to mind because I've been recently interacting with them. These are new types of platforms, and there we have to think about how to curate the data, how to make it accessible. There's this acronym FAIR: findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And I may have gotten that wrong, but I think that's about the right acronym.
Sounds right.
That sound right?
Yeah, it sounds right.
The idea is we have to store our data in a way that, it is fair so that everybody can gain access to it and use it and maximize the potential for that data. These challenges are evolving as we speak, and the traditional model for journals is also evolving accordingly, so that, the journals now are, of course, digitally accessible, but they weren't when I was a grad student. I had to go down to the library and photocopy the journals. So we'll see them continue to change and update with the times.
That's awesome. I was just wondering if we could go back to your starting experience as a grad student, getting involved in TMS and just kind of mapping out the journey, now up to this point in your career. So can you just talk us through some of the benefits of joining TMS, not just as a grad student, but then after you graduate as well, and maybe some of the differences there?
So actually, I think it even started all the way back in undergrad. A professor drove a bus of us down to a TMS annual meeting as an undergrad, and there I was just a completely wide-eyed observer, which is a great way to just take it in and just be overwhelmed and kind of how cool is it that I'm even just here watching this happen? I don't even understand half of it. But as a grad student, I started to see, watch the older graduate students who are already a few years in submit abstracts to conference. One even volunteered to be a co-organizer, which was very rare. And I thought, wow, this is great that you can do this sort of stuff, that you can submit your own ideas, you can go present. And so then that got me a chance to travel, which is always nice too. You got to see maybe locations that you've never visited before and attend these events where you got to present your own research. So that's what I did as a grad student. I remember my first speaking engagements in public were at TMS events where I got to speak about my research. And I was a nervous wreck for days beforehand. I'm sure my voice was wavering and, it wasn't probably the best presentation ever, but it was well received. I got to meet some practitioners. I got some good feedback and felt support, felt a little bit of love from the people that I think are my heroes.
And so could you walk us through being able to present your work? Because I think that's a very unique opportunity to be able to present your work to your heroes. What was that like? And what do you think that gave you?
Well, I just described how nerve-wracking it was. That's what it was like. But I think there's a real art to storytelling. Luckily, my research advisor at Berkeley, Professor Rob Ritchie, he's an amazing storyteller. I had a lot to emulate. I still have a lot to learn from how he puts together a scientific story. But I think we all have to become better communicators and advocates for our work. And that's why, again, props to you guys for doing what you're doing, because you're advocating and communicating in a style that is still new to material scientists. But the traditional technical presentation is still about communication. And so I think I still, to this day, as I refine my storytelling, I think about what message I'm trying to convey. And back then, I must admit, as a young graduate student, I felt like my job was to just show them the results. That's really not the right way to think about presentations. The right way to think about presentations is, what are the implications of your results? Take them to the impact and start with the impact, and then unpack the results in the middle of the presentation for sure. But we really want to understand how this fits in. Why is it important? Who cares? And why is this changing the world? What's going to change about the world because of your result? What surprise that you've just unearthed is going to rewrite the textbooks? And so framing it that way, not just, my job is to present the data I got from my instrument. No, the data is to interpret it. And that's where the story becomes so much more interesting.
I love that. I was just about to ask, and I think you already provided some really great advice, but is there anything else, like if you were to go back to when you first gave that presentation, knowing what you know now, what advice would you give yourself in terms of crafting that effective story and really sharing that impact while also, like sharing kind of the results that you had, since this is a very technical presentation inherently?
I think I've been evolving, but I've also seen the community evolve a bit in presentation style over the last several decades. I see the way that we use visual aids changing a lot, and I like it. It used to be that there was your visuals were sort of like meant to just really show off all the information. I maybe had my mental state was wrong. Maybe thought I was going to show all the information and then, sort out the details as I'm talking through it. Now I realize I use my visuals sparingly. I use just the essential visuals that I need to tell the story that I'm trying to tell. Maybe one graph per slide instead of a quad chart of 4 different graphs. Maybe carefully curating the information so that I'm not just providing a bunch of extraneous information to sort out, separately. And I also am careful about how much words I use in the visuals. In fact, I try to make the title of each of my slides just be the message. That is the punchline of that slide. The slide won't say something like results. The slide will say, this data says that the material is twice as strong, whatever, something like that. So that people, if they just read the words, my philosophy is if they look through my set of 10 to 20 slides and they just read the title of each slide, that's all they need, and they would go home with the take-home message.
That's great advice. And it definitely seems like you've been able to hone your craft, and just this gives you a great arena to really practice this. And I think that's a great tip that I've heard but never internalized. So it's just great to hear from people who have already done it multiple times, so I don't have to be as nervous as you were the first time I get up there.
I don't know. You guys will be great. I'm just so impressed in general with students these days. They seem so polished compared to at least the way I was several decades ago.
I don't know about that, but thank you.
But continuing my question, so I think TMS plays a really important part where you have people like you with all this experience and you're trying to empower the next generation. How can TMS as a society bring more awareness to material science and be able to translate the information that you've gained into the new generation?
Well, obviously communication plays a big role. We've already talked about the way we communicate among ourselves. I think TMS and other materials professional societies have to continue to challenge themselves to not just communicate to themselves, but also to communicate to the broader world. Again, props to you guys. That'll be the last time I say it. But we have to continue to look for how we engage future materials practitioners or also just members of society who don't know what material science is doing for them. So certainly communication is a big role. But the second thing we have to do is we have to be a society that welcomes people in. And so addressing diversity, equity, and inclusion is something that TMS is very conscious of and proactive about, trying to create a welcoming society. Another one of the tenets of our strategic plan, the TMS Aspires plan, is to be a highly inclusive and welcoming society. So communication, diversity, and then, I think that's about it.
I just like to frame it as we're products of our society. And so the really easy example is like American football is really popular in America because that's what we play, and English football, etc. And I'm sure there's great American football players in Europe, and I'm sure vice versa, but you need to be experienced to it. And so I think with our goal is to meet the people where they are. And so I guess my challenge to you as professional societies is that you can leverage all this information, but now going to the people. And I think the big issue that we've talked to in the UK, they don't even know about material science. And in the US, we're not much better. It's just, I think that your challenge is you have all this great information. Now get it in a format, in a way to reach the young people so they even know it's an option. Because frankly, I didn't even know until I just stumbled across it. And I feel like that's almost everybody's story.
I totally agree. We have to get the message out about why material science is changing and improving the world. I will say there's one other aspect we haven't touched on yet that's a really important role of a professional society in the same vein. When you talk about sports professionals, the football player, they really are rewarded for the outcomes that they've created. So they have championship rings or medals or some sort of recognition of their accomplishment. And this is a huge role that professional societies play as well, is providing external recognition and validation for practitioners. Whereas the institutions may recognize an employee for their contributions to that institution, the professional societies like TMS provide a second type of recognition for people who are contributing to the field. So this is something that there are dozens and dozens of awards that TMS gives out every year to provide people that validation and recognition to say, you are a rock star. You are top on our list. Thank you for doing this work for us and contributing to the society in this particular way. So I'm really also proud of the slate of awards that we have and the slate of recipients who get these awards every year. As vice president right now, I get to review the slate of recipients and awards, and I just look at the slate and I think, wow, these are superstars. Isn't this awesome? So this is a way that we communicate to the world. These are rock stars, and we validate their contributions to society in this way.
I love that. I didn't even think about it, but you're like validating people's kind of contributions to the materials world as a whole, right? And so I'm just thinking we should just have a materials Hall of Fame, right? I mean, we probably do, but like just making it official, similar to the NFL, like football,
That's right. And we do, as a professional society, we have a Hall of Fame. We have several different levels of. We don't call it that. We don't call it. Maybe our pinnacle award is to become a fellow of TMS, and this traditionally has been constrained to about 100 people 100 living TMS fellows at any one time. So it's extremely prestigious honor to receive, and these people are just amazing. What they've done for society is just each and every one of them has made amazing contributions. That's sort of, if you will, that's our Hall of Fame.
Absolutely. Yeah. And just going off of kind of what David mentioned before about going where the people are, I just wanted to add that I think TMS does a great job of that, just because you're inherently tied to material advantage chapters, right? So the journey for an undergrad student in MSE is, what all clubs and organizations are available to me. And often you find a material advantage chapter and then you learn about TMS. And so I think this has been a challenge for It's a Material world, as well as just outside of that realm, outside of these student orgs. How do you reach high school students or middle school students and teach them about material science? And I think that maybe this is a way we can collaborate in the future, but short form content, people are on TikTok, they're on Instagram, they're on YouTube, right? And that's where we're trying to kind of expand to, and we're creating that content. But I think that's also just another way where you can share this technical information from a technical journal and then consolidate it into something that is easy to understand for a college student or a high school student.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I think one of the challenges we've been discussing, I've been discussing this exact thing with the communication director, Lynn Robinson at TMS. And, we talk about content and how do we put forth valuable content in a manner that is digestible and curated in a reasonable way. And I think, there again, we have a huge volunteer base to draw from. But putting it together in just the right way is still a recipe that's evolving, and we're continuing to look at how we can send the message wide and what audience and what are our objectives. Our objectives, first and foremost, we want to help educate our own members and materials practitioners. So that's one we think we do really well through our journals and through our events. But then, the broader audience, what is our objective when it comes to educating the general population about material science? What is our objective when it comes to reaching out to high school students, for example? And so that's, where these short form formats, TikTok videos, I think there can be a natural resistance to this too, because as intelligent professionals, sometimes TikTok may seem a bit too short. It's a little trite. And so I think there's a natural resistance and this tension between a resistance and the possible outcomes from that. So that's why I think these professional societies are struggling with how best to use social media and so forth over, as they evolve.
I don't know if you can let us in, but one thing I've seen personally is that a lot of content creators are coming to the forefront. And so there's stories about like there's a doctor who became a content creator and stopped being a doctor because content creation was like one, a way to make more money, but two, he felt like he could do more good. And so I guess for TMS, how do they see this content creation going within like the next 3 years?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know that I understand the 3-year strategy in detail.
Okay.
But I think, honestly, I think there's a lot of watching what you guys are doing as content creators, seeing what's working and what's not working, who it's reaching and who it's not reaching. I think there's a lot of paying attention to the evolving state and trying to think about how we carefully play a role in this arena.
Yeah. One little piece of advice that I guess I've just learned, and David and I have kind of like figured this out, is that it's almost like a funnel, right? And so you're talking about, what does this 1-minute video actually contribute? Can you really like share all of that? The answer sometimes is no, right? But it is sometimes a funnel, right? Where if you capture their attention, and attention spans have gotten shorter and shorter over the years, then you can convince someone to click on that link, right? And then go and read the full article, or just read the abstract next. And then if they're interested, they read the full journal article. So I think that's really the power of this content, especially for the younger generation, where attention spans are naturally shorter. So you have to really capture their attention in like 5 seconds, basically.
Right. No, I love, and something that's evolving in professional societies in general is the idea of flash talks. So even at our events, we're now using more and more flash talks, for example, for poster presenters as a way to introduce their topic. And I think that idea of how do you communicate your message in a few minutes, that short form, in the most compelling way to engage people and get them to want to attend your poster presentation, for example. That's something that is evolving, and we're using more and more now than ever before. And I think, the idea of recording those flash talks as content that we could put on YouTube to get people excited about presenters. I've even contemplated, this is my personal contemplation, that we traditionally write abstracts. So the written form of an abstract is, is sort of in the dry scientific form. But what if we ask people to instead submit a 2-minute video abstract? And could we use that video abstract? Some of them will be boring, I'm sure. But some of them will be like, oh my gosh, they just really invented the best thing since sliced bread. This is a revolution. I love that content. And now let's get the word out. Let's get their permission to put this broadcast this far and wide, not just for our members, but to get society excited. So I wonder if there's more opportunities in that domain to use our participants and our members as content creators.
I think that's a fantastic idea. And I think it's kind of like this dating app idea where we have so much information at our fingertips. I could look up anything on Wikipedia and be presented with articles and articles and articles. And so now I get to be more picky about what I read, because if this doesn't interest me, I just swipe and then I'm on the next interesting thing. And so I think these flash talks and the more engaging science communication, I think is needed, because like you said, most of them are going to be boring, but hopefully some of us can work on being more exciting and getting it out there and just becoming that thing that can catch our attention to dive into the actual content, which is more boring, sure, but interesting in a different way.
Yeah, and I think another challenge that professional societies are wrestling with is how we can tailor that information for you. So, if you've already expressed interest in certain topics, how do we make sure that we show you what topics are being presented related to that? Of course, with our programs, you can do a keyword search right now, and that's the current state of the art with regard to finding the information that you want. But are there ways that we can curate the content to tailor it towards your interests and help provide you with the most likely content first, since you can always dig and find the other more obscure stuff later, but really tailoring towards the individual is something that's just emerging.
Yeah, that's super tough. It's like algorithms and subscribing to newsletters and it's a bunch of ideas, right? But I wanted to take a step back to, this is like something that I went through personally, right after graduation. It's a whole other set of challenges that I face, right? Not just, connecting with companies and networking to get a job or submitting a paper. It's, like, I guess, developing as a professional. So I just wanted to hear your input on what are those benefits once I graduate, and why is it worth it to stick with TMS and stay in this material society as a whole?
Well, in addition to staying abreast of the developments in the field, so you're not archaic after a 30-year career.
Yeah.
I think, the networking is a big deal too. You brought up networking before, but I just want to, say it's so important that you're connected to other professionals. If you're ever in a situation where you need a new job, you want that network of other people so you can call them up and say, hey, your company would be great to work for. Are you hiring? So I think that really is that connection and the sense of community that we have. And this is why I love TMS. I really haven't gotten into this yet, but TMS has a family feel to it. It's that grassroots nature, the fact that 1,000 of us are contributing to the society in parallel, and the sense that each one of us has our own stamp on the society. But that makes it more of a family feel, like this is something we're doing together. And that feeling of shared mission does create that network affiliation for you. So you say, you contact these people in your network who you've met through a TMS meeting or other TMS activity. And, if you're, even if you have perfect job security, you're still struggling with some topic. We're struggling with this new policy that prevents us from doing, handling hydrofluoric acid or whatever, these are people with shared challenges. Oftentimes, material scientists are quite specialized. And so in their institution, they may be kind of isolated. There might not be that many of them around. I'm lucky I'm at Sandia, where we have, as we discussed, we have hundreds of material scientists. Most people aren't so lucky. And, the TMS events provide a chance for them to come together with like-minded people who are wrestling with the same challenges at their own home institutions. So you get this sense of shared challenge, that they're walking in the same shoes or in similar shoes. And that really helps you feel less isolated.
I totally understand that. I think that even like in my situation, right? So I'm in the medical device industry. And so inherently, a lot of people are biomedical engineers or mechanical engineers by their major. And so the question always arises, how do I provide unique value as a material scientist and engineer in the medical device arena, right? And so that is where these TMS events and the networking can really come in handy. It seems like where I can get other people's input and take that and then really drive value within my own organization.
That's right. You can see how other biomedical materials practitioners are providing value, and you can find your own path in that regard.
I guess this leads us to the big question of how can our listeners get involved with TMS?
There's many ways. So we talked about the Materials Advantage chapter. If you're an undergrad or a grad student and you have access to one, that's a great way to get involved. If you want to just straight up be a member, there's easy ways to do that online. You can go to tms.org/membership, and that will allow you to sign up. There's discounts for students, by the way, and for retired people, I think, as well. So, but for people practicing with an institution, if you're employed, sometimes employers will offset the cost of membership as well, because employers recognize that their employees do better work when they're not working in isolation, but they're supported by their other colleagues in other institutions. Then the other way to get involved, aside from just becoming a member directly, is to come to any one of our events. You can go to the tms.org website and click under events, and you'll see, I think there's about 10 or 12 upcoming events listed right now of different activities. We've got there's various things like a World Congress on ICME, Integrated Computational Materials Engineering. That's going to be next May in Orlando, or there's a workshop on super alloys Super Alloy 718 in derivatives in 2023. So if Alloy 718 is your thing, we got a whole workshop for you on that. And there's an upcoming workshop on high entropy alloys, or if you just want to see it all, I really encourage people to try to get to one of our TMS annual meetings. This is, like I said, I feel like this is the Olympics of material science.
That's so cool. It's just so amazing to see the breadth, but also just the technical depth that you go in with each of these topics. So yeah, no, I really enjoyed this conversation, Brad. It was a pleasure having you on the show. And thank you for sharing so much information about your journey and the values and the benefits of joining TMS as well.
Well, thank you, Puneeth and David, for communicating to the world about material science.
Yeah.
As a materials engineer, we can make an impact in nearly every single industry. But with that versatility comes a lot of different options to choose from. So if you have no idea which industry or position is right for you, believe me, you're not alone. I've been there, done that. But just for a moment, imagine narrowing down your ideal role and company by the end of this week. Imagine being able to secure your dream job offer without having to apply to hundreds of job openings. Our online course, MSE Academy, includes video testimonials, resumes, interview prep, and mentorship from materials engineers who have been in your shoes. We also connect our members with companies and industry professionals in our expansive network to help accelerate your job search as much as possible. To learn more and get started, simply click the link in the description below. And if you enroll within the next 24 hours, we'll add 3 bonus career development resources. I hope to see you there.